Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditative practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week, we'll explore the balance that exists between the virtual and the real, the balance formed between the basic elements of geometry, point, lines, and planes, the balance that lets us see something in our imagination and represent it or find it there out on the paper through that act of drawing. It'll be a simple exercise, drawing linear elements with some volume, short sticks, perhaps they'll look like, that gather together in small clusters, spread around the page, balancing out that empty territory with line, with shade, with tone, and finding ease in that space between things, developing their own little three-dimensional axes, slowly emerging as objects we recognize, and then letting ourselves draw into them, give them dimension, give them front, back, side, top. We can see into that space something real and something virtual at the same time, balancing imagination with expression. I'm going to work in pencil today, probably a little mechanical one because I'm used to drawing it and I like to work with it. And then maybe having a few others on hand, like a 2B or a lighter pencil if you want to frame some lines or bring in some heavier shading towards the end as we start to give depth to our composition. Whatever you have will work. If you do a pen, just draw a little lighter, bring a little more attention to what's in front and what's in back. If you have a pencil, you have a little more freedom to play with that foreground-background relationship. At the end, it'll all come together in some three-dimensional representation of point, line, and plane, sticks extending, crossing, gathering in space. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. And I thought this one be a bit of a meditation on balance between pieces, balance between elements in space. A look at finding balance, but something simple, a collection of linear elements, kind of like sticks, and what will probably end up being little clusters. So introduction-wise, do a lot of things that make 3D looking sticks. Just a rectangle at a bit of an angle, connected to a rectangle that shares some of those angles, connected to another rectangle that shares them. So a lot of maintaining kind of parallelness to make something that looks like a little stick. And that can be of any size, a very large one, a little easier for the practicing. Start to look like a block, or very small ones. Just giving some dimension to a linear element, so that feels somewhat physical. I'll have the exercise, we'll be looking at how, probably the thinner ones for me, but whichever you choose is fine. They can gather, cluster around, and so we may not know their configurations to begin with, and some may slip in front of others. It's easy to draw a corner on the wrong side, and the pencil we can just draw then over the top so that these sticks can cluster and collect. And we can use a little bit of shading if you have a heavier pencil like a 2B or thicker pencil or something. We can give a little shade to sides. And if we always shade the same side in a similar tone, in this case the front right is a little dark, maybe the left a little less dark, and the top you can just leave open. Things will start to blend together and hide if we make some overlapping mistakes. And these can go in kind of any direction, as long as two lines on two opposite sides are parallel. It'll start to look like some three-dimensional volume. Even if it comes straight down, though that one's kind of a weird case. And we'll explore it across the page and see if we can tie them all together in some kind of loose balance, the tectonic clusters. Whatever page or paper you want to work with for the longer exercise, pencils around to do various heaviness of line and a little shading as you see fit. We'll begin somewhere to establish a little directionality on the page, but that can oscillate wherever feels like a nice, comfortable place to draw. Feel this upper right corner is a good distance from me. I'm going to draw a line with a bit of an angle, not directly related to the page, and just establishing the first length of something physical there on the paper. Once we've established the direction, primary, the linear extended length of this, I like to use the end to decide how it develops its three-dimensionality. Can be oblique and just draw a square. Well, probably here it'll be a little more natural if we do a skewed rectangle or square, so it seems to be going off perpendicular to that first line. A little bit off there. And then draw a parallel back along the first length until we kind of close it at that same perpendicular looking angle. And since these sticks are virtual, just floating on the page, the more consistent the angles are, the more parallel-ish they look, the more square sticks will look. But any angle can work, because the stick could just be cut at an angle. I don't worry too much about it all being perfect. They're just different shaped sticks when our eye perceives them in 3D. I'm going to move around a little bit, get a sense of the page. Have one there, maybe at a different angle, just to explore. One here, lower, one wherever feels like a nice empty space that could hold on to an element. I'm going to play with the dimension, some a little longer, more rectangular, some a little more square. And just use a few sticks floating in various directions to establish some elements on the paper, to give the empty space the start of potential composition. You can think of them drawing towards or away, moving down or across, but always starting with that longer edge as a way to establish where the linearity will take precedence, and then working around to give the perception of an end and the perception of sides. A few floating elements now change how we see the paper, the relationship of those elements potentially to the boundary, to the empty space between them. We might see opportunity to guide that space, or just pick a place and draw the first line, that first edge of a long rectangular volume, reaching out across the paper. In its creation, in that presence, in its act of forming, it will change the structure and relationships of that page. And as we have a few, we can start to work now to give each one its own presence and weight, to expand upon it, and look for some balance in how they work with the paper. As you go along, you might find opportunity or voids call for another interaction. We have a few going as we'll look at each one, maybe jump around from each one and begin to build a little more clustering of those lines. What can work more easily is to cluster behind. So choosing one of the primary directions. So we already have one strong linear axis defined. And work up and down first. We work kind of the left and right across the axes. I just draw a line up for a little ways. Maybe lightly cross my object and draw that line down just for continuity. The light part will disappear. Just like the others, this can begin to form that 90-degree feeling corner. We can accentuate the primary direction by drawing parallel to it and connecting the corners around in what looks like a rectangular prism or a stick. And placing one behind like that, just kind of touching on the edge, means you don't have to worry about too much overlap. But in some cases, we're going to get a little overlap if we want to play around with things. And I'll do one in the cross direction as well here, going perpendicular to that long edge, having it cross underneath. In this case, crosses spatially in front of the other one, which is okay. We'll just draw through it. And it forms its own corner out in space to show one face towards us. Complete one face to the top. And one to the side. Each object having kind of that front, top, and left or right side to it, depending on orientation. And we stack a few more, some maybe very small, very light. Some long, some short. They can maybe connect in a corner, make a small junction. And as you draw, make guesses about which side should be showing. You change and play with that and feel open to experiment as you work. Jump between the clusters, now using what's established to play in that space of the axes local to each initial moment, slowly creeping out towards each other to fill in some of the gaps, and take the time of completing these skewed rectangles for a little 3D appearance and follow some of our breath. First, noticing just what is your natural pace now, or breathing. Taking a couple moments without the pen or pencil moving and just observing it. By observing, we always guide a little bit, but noticing if it was shallow or regular or low and deep. And bringing it to just a little below natural. Just a little slower, just a little deeper into the body cavity and the lungs to bring a little more noticing to that breath. And as you feel ready, probably on an exhalation, finding another place to explore a long linear segment. And breathing through it onto the page. We're dealing with various lengths of lines, and so the breath cycles will come through short bursts like the small face or long extensions. But let's bring our mindfulness and our attention to breathing in and filling out just a little more than normal, exhaling at a natural rate, and seeing how far it goes for each different part, drawing around those sides. The long ones, nice exhalations through space. The short ones, maybe a little clustering. Breathing in and recognizing in the pauses between things. Savoring that exhalation as something moves long and out across the page. The light marks of the pencil, guidable, adjustable, as we see how edges combine. Breathing in with the tension, exhaling, begin to mark on the paper. And playing in 3D, it's easy to miss the direction. But these boxes can be solid or transparent. You can layer, stack, move along next to, build up volumes in space, crossing roughly parallel and perpendicular. Starting to notice in that cycle of pausing with the in-breath, taking a moment there in the space between you and the paper. The direction you're bringing to the page, the side of something that you're drawing out, becoming familiar with it. Developing a mindful attention to which side you start on. Face, touching face. The volume extending away from a contact edge. Building that perception of volume, three-dimensionality, the relationship between things in space. The breath a chance to see, to align the eye and the hand with the axes present on the page. Crossing and layering with these linear elements, stacking to build something on the page. As we draw a few more, filling out some different areas, slowly they reach towards each other, somewhere in space. We can bring shading to visualize their volume into play. I'll add just a couple more here to complete the quadrants of my drawing. But we can always come back and continue to grow the composition at any time. Switch to a little bit heavier pencil just for the quickness of shading. Choose a side and directionality. A little heavy on the right facing side, a little medium on the left facing side, and leave the top kind of light and empty. So a little light from above, kinda to the left. And just begin finding a measure to shade in. If you're using something precise and light, like a pen or a mechanical pencil, it might be continuous kind of hatch lines, evenly spaced. If you're using something a little softer, a little heavier, like a drawing pencil, you can bring some shading, just layering up parallel lines in a direction, perhaps aligned with the edge, if that's comfortable, or relative to your position of the body, finding a place where you can move that pen or pencil back and forth within the defined boundary. If it goes a little outside the lines, that's okay. Just gives a little softness to the edges. And mix it up and go a little darker on the left-hand side. As we do that, we begin to get volume, distinction between left, right, and top, and carry that same shading or tone consistently through things, keeping our attention to the orientation in space, the light balancing with the dark through a mid-tone, helping our eyes to see and our mind to imagine volume. That act of shading, a nice repetitive time to just be present, feel the hand move, breathe evenly, enjoy the interaction between the graphite and the paper, the ink, the fibers, and draw for a few minutes quietly. The light lines describing the connection between a couple of points in space. The point extending out across the page. The collection of lines connecting at the corners, the starting and stopping points of those points in space. They wrap around and form volume from surface, point, line, and plane, simple geometries, describing the edges or faces of things, describing where material meets air, or material meets another material, and then the shade, the tone, not quite shadow, not quite the hard projection of light, just the subtle differencing of one side from another, transitioning a crisp geometry into a perceptual value of lightness and darkness. Slowly things that we saw before recede, little inconsistencies of edge or line absorbed into the tone or shade as our eye adjusts to the contrast. Slowly, things that we didn't notice emerge: depth, contrast between elements, heaviness and lightness, difference balances out the elements of the page, letting us see a little deeper, or maybe imagine a little more physicality. So we're just connecting dots in space, points moving around, forming higher levels of complexity, relationships and connections, mindfully balanced in their construction to look like something. We're reaching towards the end, just a minute or two left. Continue to draw, to take in what is there. And as you start to reach perhaps a resting point or stopping point, a completing of an area, or completing of all the elements present on the page. Taking in a nice expanding breath for a few cycles, really filling out the rib cage, filling out the stomach and abdomen, letting the diaphragm fully engage while you're drawing, or if you're done, taking a rest and being present with that breath. Either will work. Start to combine senses back together. Feeling how we engage the space around us. Clothes move, the air moves. We hear the rush in of breath, or the heaviness of exhalation. When you're ready, let the pencil or pen come down. Take one or two more of those really engaging breaths. Hear the sound bounce around you. Feel material expand and contract with you. And a big exhalation. Open the eyes to the space, to the drawing. Give yourself a little stretch to get ready and go into the next part of your day. Well, thank you for joining along in the exercise. Hopefully you found a little cohesion there as you begin to work with those parallel and skewed lines meeting at a perceptually perpendicular interaction. And then we can begin to see space forming by connecting that point into a line, around into a plane, and further expanding that to volume, bringing the shade and shadow to give them a bit of depth, a bit of presence and contrast on the page, and create that balancing act of three-dimensionality, of perception of light and depth, of lines forming into composition. If you enjoyed the exercise, leave some comments below, let me know what you found. Give it a thumbs up and share with your friends so other people can enjoy learning and expressing through the act of drawing and finding a little bit of space of calm and relaxation along the way. You can subscribe for new episodes each week, usually on Wednesday mornings here on YouTube, to find more ways into a mindful practice of drawing, things you can take with you for 2 to 5 minutes at your desk in between a meeting, or just needing to take a little break and let something form there as a doodle on the side of the notes, or as a longer exercise, looking, searching, opening up to creativity and letting that expression flow out through the many techniques and methods that we explore through this act of mindful drawing here on this channel. But wherever the exercise takes you and whatever you have in store for the rest of the day, I hope it's good. Draw well. Thank you.